Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar about app promotion and reputation management in APAC. My name is Katya. I'm director of APAC and Middle East in AppFollow, and today I will be the moderator of our session. First, let's check if audio and video work well. Let me know in the chat box that you can hear and see me well. I will wait for a second. Hi, Daryl. Perfect. Nice. Yeah, okay. So it looks like everyone is good. Thanks a lot, guys, for... Hey, Vidya. nice to see you. Thanks a lot for your replies. So we're all good. And let me introduce our today's guest. Almitra, nice to see you. Almitra is the head of marketing at CleverTap. Ankit, director of tech at Branch, and Aditya, strategic customer success manager at AppFollow. Thank you guys for joining us for this discussion. I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be very exciting. So let's get started. But before we start, I will say a couple of words about our agenda. So the webinar is in question and answers format. And thanks a lot, guys, who sent us all these questions previously. We picked up some of them, and we will reply to them. If we didn't reply to your question, please send us in the chat box. And we will try to reply them during our session, and we'll try to answer all of them. If not, we will back to you later. Okay, so shall we start? Our first question is actually very interesting. I think it came from the European companies mostly. So many brands successfully, who are successful in Western world, they trying to apply the same marketing and user acquisition strategies in Asia Pacific. And most of the time, maybe not most, but a lot of the time they fail. How actually different the Asia Pacific market, and what the elements we should all pay attention to? Okay, who wants to be the first?
I can take it. Hey, so this is actually a great question. And I mean, a lot of people, the mistake that we end up doing is thinking of Asia or APAC market as one, but it's actually not a one market, it's a fragmented market, which consists of many different cultures, languages, beliefs, and the strategies that tend to work in the West sometimes don't apply as much here, primarily because of this reason. So users in APAC, we're attached to our languages. The kind of phones that we use are different. So what will play an important role is marketers customizing things for the APAC market. Only 45-50% people use their phones in English language. And there are other languages like Mandarin, Hindi, Bahasa, and things like that, which are popular in the APAC market. So there is a good crowd which wants you to advertise to them in their local languages. In terms of devices also, Android and iOS penetration. So I think if my stats are not wrong, about 85% penetration or installs that we usually see are from an Android phone. And typically in the West, this distribution is 50-50, so 50 Android and 50 iOS, and which is why out-of-store channels, OEM partnerships become an important part of the marketing strategy of brands.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I agree about the separation of the languages, and okay.
I mean, to Aditya's point, I completely agree. I'd like to add a couple of other, aspects as well. Like if you, as you said, that APAC is not one one market. Like there are different small markets within the region. Like you have China, you have Korea, and then Southeast Asia and India. Another interesting thing is that all of these markets are at a different stage of internet and mobile penetration and adoption, right? So the way internet is adopted probably in China is not the same, the way people use the same mobile device in, let's say, in Indonesia or in India. So I think that is also one factor that, really kicks in when you're trying to address users or trying to acquire users across these geographies. So I think the fragmentation of the demography is also an aspect that you need to keep in mind while solving for this APAC market.
Yeah, it's actually when we're talking about APAC market, it's like we're sort of always saying, "Oh, this is a region," but actually it's so different countries there and so different strategies in each country. So. But I think it brings like more excitement to work with. Aditya, Almitra, what do you think about it? Almitra? Okay, I think we lost Almitra for a second, but okay, let's see. Our second question is
just a minor thought which came to my mind right now as we were speaking about this. So these markets are also different because, for example, China, it doesn't have Google Play, it doesn't have Facebook. So the primary channels, let's say, which tend to work in India don't work as well in China. Japan and Korea, they are very agency heavy. So you need to work with those traditional agencies to be able to sort of get media spends from brands and things like that. And like Ankit said, India and Indonesia, these are markets where, app downloads have started to happen, but people aren't ready to pay as much money. And Australia and New Zealand is actually still on web. So mobile is like super new to them. So I think these are like distinct factors of the market which sort of, make it different from the US or from the West world where they are more developed and we are sort of more emerging in nature. So that's the minor point that I wanted to make.
I have a question. What do you think? Which markets do you think is easier to penetrate first? I mean, okay, you're a Western company. You're just discovering the Asia Pacific for yourself. A part of Pacific. Let's talk about Asia. It's a booming market now. And which countries actually you pick up first? Almitra, what do you think about the countries?
Hi, could you just repeat that question, please?
Okay, sure. So we're talking about that many Western brands who are very successful in their own countries, in like European countries or it's a US market. They're trying, when they launching their businesses in Asia Pacific, they're trying the same marketing and the user acquisition strategies in this region. And a lot of the times they fail. And we're talking about it's like why that happens and what elements to pay attention to.
All right, perfect. So I was in San Francisco for almost 12 years and I just moved back to Mumbai 3 years ago. So I think I can answer this pretty well since having been worked in both the markets. So there are three primary elements that I have seen that differentiate the APAC market. One is a high touch model. The users in APAC like to be marketed to and shown value through campaigns that are relevant. They don't mind the inclusion as much as their Western counterparts, and they like to consume information at a much rapid rate. The second thing I've seen is adding processes and strategies that are uniform across all geographies in APAC. So we did talk about APAC being a fragmented market, and it's completely true. Hence, it is really important to understand the cultural nuances. If you're a content app, you need to localize it or add more regional content. And finally, the third thing is the CPI. The CPI is low in APAC. So your marketing strategy needs to be extra mindful and not spend too much money on acquisition without thinking about retention, since scale can be achieved here much faster. But value will only be driven after you have shown what you can do for the end user. So these three parameters are what I have seen which differentiate the APAC and the US markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's very interesting. Okay, but can I ask again, like, which countries will be the most easiest one to start with? Can we give some tips to our attendees? Because Asia Pacific is big.
I'll maybe
So
try to build upon.
actually, it also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Aditya. Sorry.
Okay, fine. So I was just trying to build upon your point. Initially, you said that internet penetration in markets is different. So that's actually true, quite true. And China, contributes to what, 55% of installs today. So if you have a good strategy to penetrate in the Chinese markets, then it's easier to make Chinese people download those apps and make them pay for those apps. But in India, Indonesia markets, people are okay to download apps but not pay for it. So I think these are India, Indonesia are probably like the emerging markets in this sense. And which is why if money making is not the primary agenda, then probably these markets are the right place to go to. And if you want to make some money, then have a good China strategy in place is sort of my take on this.
The most paying and the most difficult. Okay.
Yeah. And one point that I want to add here also, I agree. I think India and Indonesia would be a good test bed for a lot of companies, coming in from Europe into the region. But it's also, I see a lot of teams and marketing teams getting too siloed down into the approach of, just the app. But if you take a step back and look at what your business is and what is the problem that you're trying to solve, there are different regions that can give you, that are a lower hanging fruit compared to other regions, except for, let's say, a utility app or a gaming app that you can, address across the board. But if it is, let's say you're into a hyperlocal business or you're in the, other e-commerce business, then I think there are a lot of good test beds in APAC, including Indonesia, and Thailand is coming up really well. And then, of course, India.
Yeah. So how should brands organize work with like multiple countries and languages in this region? How they should start? I don't know. What do they do?
Forget not just the region. Like in India, you have more than 300 languages. So it really depends on the kind of demography that you want to target. My suggestions to apps that are there are different stages wherein a business is at, right? Like if there's an app which is in the initial stages of scale, like they are just rolling out, entering the market. One approach that I've seen, companies doing really well is that you put a parameter on the demography that you want to target, and then squeeze the numbers from there and use that as a scalable model across the regions, right? Like for example, if I were to, if I have APAC aspirations as a business, I would first want to, enter a region wherein I would be able to acquire, 50K, 100K, whatever is your inflection point, those users from that region, learn from that, and then use that model to multiply, across regions, instead of thinking of going a pan APAC approach right from the word go. But if you are, let's say, already a big business in Europe, you have the deep pockets to go and run those experiments, then it would definitely make sense to hyper localize as much as possible. And Uber is a great example of that. Like if you see in India, they obviously, by the time they came initially, and then as and when they grew in India, they had they have hyper localized their UI, their everything right from the services that they offer. So I'm in Bangalore, I would have an Uber UI, but as soon as I take a flight and go land in Delhi, my UI would change. So depends on the stage of scale you're at.
So
yeah, it's a big difference. Almitra, what do you think?
Yeah, so I would like to add to this, and I completely agree with what was said before. So the main thing is basically to start off with your total addressable market, right? APAC is not something that you can have a cookie cutter approach. You need to come up with a wedge. So the ideal way to go about it is to understand your business and figure out like the total addressable market, maybe Singapore or Jakarta, depending on. For example, Gojek is such a big brand in Jakarta, and they have done a phenomenal job out there. And after that, you figure out your verticals, maybe healthcare or food tech or ride sharing. And then you try to figure out your beachhead or the vertical strategy. And you try to penetrate that as much as possible into that market. And so basically, it depends on what your KPIs are. If your KPIs are brand awareness and revenue attribution, then basically brand is a perception of value, right? So if you need to have a perception, then you need to have a regional bias and understanding of the local differences. So your strategies, right from your brand positioning, go to market, to even product to some extent, need to be customized, and it needs to be evolved around that. But if you don't have the bandwidth to do all of that, then maybe Singapore could be an interesting test bed, because it does mimic the Western countries quite a bit more compared to the other markets in APAC.
Mm-hmm. Aditya, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, actually,
What do you think?
I agree with the points that Mitra and Ankit made. In my opinion, the engineering and the product side of things can be driven centrally during the initial phases of when you're trying to sort of launch into a particular market. But business functions, they need to be present locally. Marketing being a business function, you need a lot of local context. And locals, these people have more knowledge about the culture, they have more knowledge about the prospective audience, so they can devise strategies which will make the most out of your marketing spends. So probably a good strategy will be to hire for one leadership role and one or two execute the people who can execute your strategies, those kind of people, so that you are devising marketing strategy locally, and two are executing it on ground locally. So that's, I think, the approach which has tend to work well with a lot of, at least, apps which are trying to come to these markets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's more applying to big medium enterprises and big enterprises, because we're talking about, there is always needs to be a budget for that. But if we're talking for some like local startups, which can be successful, and we have a lot of examples, like when company starts from small markets and they suddenly had a huge growth. So if we're not talking about the representatives and like a big marketing campaigns, where the companies should start off their localization. So which layers should the company start localizing, like app page or app interface, marketing campaigns, customer support, for example? Which of that layers are like the most important to start with and to support lately? If we're not talking about like to have the full company represent in the region.
So localization can be pretty expensive, right? And it is extremely resource intensive as well. So one way, so I worked for bigger companies like Cisco, where budget was never a problem, and then I worked for smaller companies, Series A, Series B, where definitely budget is a challenge. So the way to go about it is you can approach this with an MVP, a minimum viable product. You can break it down based on the user journey, starting from IDA, basically, awareness, interest, desire, and action. For awareness, it should be like localization of the landing pages, ads, or blog content. For interest, you could start off with localization of webinars, and then you can localize support docs and some action or some screens that show immediate value within your product, and that can be converted immediately. You can also extrapolate that to customer success to drive feature adoption. So figuring out your entire strategy and aligning it with the customer journey, the adoption that they have with your brand, right from brand awareness till the time they monetize on your platform. You can actually localize maybe one or two pieces across the journey and then figure out if this works for you. And then you can put in more effort behind it and then figure out if you need to go full throttle on localization.
I have a very starkly different point of view here. So I come from obviously a customer service success background, and which is more B2B. But we're talking about B2C apps. So I still tend to think that I think support, us being able to sort of answer people if they have any sort of questions or if they get stuck. So support is probably like the first thing that you localize. You have capacity to handle queries coming in from the new market that you're penetrating. and then you go and probably start creating your app store pages, creatives, descriptions, and things like that. So I'm talking about ASO effort here, to see if your app is something that interests the users of that market. And once that is done, you start customizing the product. And when I say product, Ankit took a really good example of Uber. They've customized the product locally. So we see a different UI when you are here in India, and different cities in India, and you go to Singapore and open the same Uber app, and it's a different UI. And the last thing that you should probably customize is marketing. Because, I mean, I am a big believer of the fact that good marketing can kill bad products. So have like a good product first and then start marketing it to your users is like my take on the localization bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's
Sorry, I just wanted to do a plus. I just wanted to do a plus one on Aditya's comments there. And he rightly said so. If you're going into a new market, the first thing that you need to make sure is that you are able to listen to your customers, and your customers are able to listen to you in whatever language, culture, whatever that is. Now that could be through support, or that could be through any other mediums, and that is that takes the least inertia, right? Like you can do that without a lot of investment if you're a growing company, of course, if you're small in scale. So I would also take sort of a ladder approach. Start with making sure that you are able to engage with your customers in those, whether it's the language or culture or whatever that is, and then take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have some practical question actually, because our attendees are very curious about the practical tips. So what is the balance between paid and organic channels? How to find this balance, and actually how to do your advertising on that markets?
So one thing is that there's hardly anything known as just app only, right? Even if you're delivering a product or a service which is mobile only, there are other channels which are there on the user's handset, right? Like you might be just be an app, a gaming app, a utility app, or any other last mile delivery service. But your users are there on social. Your users are there on, they are there on Facebook, Instagram. They are using emails on their devices, and then of course they are playing games and other apps wherein you can run highly expensive inventory on. In terms of creating an initial buzz around your app engagement and getting more active users, a lot of times businesses overinvest their dollars only on app campaigns or app activation campaigns, and lose out on the significance of a referral or social sharing or mobile web that can drive them good users. So my only recommendation there would be to, as you look at running ads, talking about CPIs on paid ads and the kind of creatives, you should also build inbuilt virality into your product, which spans across channels and not just being, inside apps.
Mm-hmm. Amita, what do you think about the advertising?
So definitely, right? So this is my bread and butter, right? So I've seen the marketing function evolve quite a bit. Initially, if you look at 10 years ago, marketing was all about branding, PR, and marcom. But today there is this thing where marketing does not have to be a cost center. It's actually a revenue center. So in most of the organizations that I have worked, even at CleverTap, marketing contributes to almost 50% of top line revenue, even though it is not a pure self-service model. So marketing can definitely add a lot of value, provided it's done the right way. And for that, it's very important for you to understand how do you want to leverage marketing, right? If it is acquisition, then you might want to focus a lot more around paid and less on organic initially, because organic takes time. If you think about HubSpot, if you think about how the inbound marketing model works, you need to create content, you need to do keyword analysis, look at keyword difficulty, and then you need to break it down by region to try to understand how this entire thing works and how people will be able to find you. So you need to have a balance between paid and organic channels, and eventually as word of mouth goes up, your organic will definitely go up compared to paid. So if you need the initial air cover, definitely spend on paid for the smaller amount. But I think everyone would agree out here, right? But that can be basically a black hole. If you just keep on paying money and acquiring users without thinking about retention or how do you basically monetize them down the funnel, you not only lose the customer, but you have bigger problems. You basically have a bad brand in the market, and that's going to affect you a lot more. So, and the channel mix, the marketing mix is different for different brands. And typically B2B, you might see paid, organic, and events work a lot better. Webinars work amazing for a B2B business. But for a B2C brand, like as mentioned, right, social media, virality, contests, campaigns, that works definitely a lot. And Facebook, I mean, I have not seen Facebook work as much for a B2B brand. LinkedIn works a lot better. ABM, account-based marketing, works a lot better. On the other hand, if you look at a B2C brand, social media and all these things where you actually have the network effect, work a lot better. So you need to understand where your end audience is and then basically reverse engineer your marketing strategy to like basically fill those gaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with it because it's everything like now going viral through the social marketing, social platforms, and it's just if people talking about you, then the friends of friends will download your application. Titi, what do you think about the channels, about the advertising?
So I think when both Ankit and Almitra were talking, continuously the thought that was going on in my head was, and then again, I sometimes tend to take very different point of views, but I tend to think that organic app discovery or app install is like a myth. Doesn't really happen. Anything when you launch doesn't really happen organically, primarily because you have like about 6 million apps on Play Store, about 3 million apps on App Store. How do you think a potential user is going to discover you until you make it to those charts, until you make it to those, popular category lists and things like that? So organic is a myth. Any, in the world that we live in, we interact with so much media. And sometimes you're able to measure media, sometimes you're not able to measure media. So one, you will have to put in effort to reach to a point where people are able to discover your apps organically. And in the beginning, sometimes as much as 80-90% traffic is paid, but that, like when I say paid, I'm talking about performance marketing, which is driving for installs. But eventually that number should, go down. The percentage should be a good 50% for organic and paid. And for sustainable businesses, it would be unwise of me to say that paid is not the best way. Brands have grown, with paid installs. What you need to figure out is your monetization strategy. If you are spending $3 to acquire a user, can you, customize your product in a way to make $20 out of that user in, let's say, 3 months of them installing your app? So that's the point of view, at least I like to take. High paid installs initially, and then that number slightly coming down, and figuring out your virality and LTV metrics in the longer run to make more money and continue to acquire users with paid marketing. So that's what I think it has to be.
I think one distinction.
How would you recommend?
Sorry, the great point made, Aditya. I know that completely agree. The power law on the App Store is completely against the new developers. I think the 100th app is an app with millions of users, so it's really difficult to be on the charts. But if I just want to address the point that we can look at organic outside of users going and searching on the App Store. What we have seen with a lot of new companies and a lot of new brands growing now, if you have deep pockets, obviously go and spend the dollars on Facebook and Google and other networks. But a lot of companies who are starting up, they focus on the channels which are, let's say, building a viral loop within the app or having your app discovered on the web. Right, most of the search right now, which is happening, is still happening on the mobile web. If you can get the user to discover your brand on the web or on social media, and then drive them from there into the app, the ROI and the scale works a lot better as compared to ads. Obviously, ads. I'm nothing against running paid ads. They definitely work, and brands have built really large businesses on top of that. It's just a matter of how much, how deep your pockets are.
Yeah, so I agree with Ankit here, because it depends, right? So as I mentioned, when I was at Cisco, budget was never a problem. So I would just go and do ads. I mean, ideally, you don't need ads for Cisco, right? Paid ads. Everyone knows about Cisco. But on the other hand, when you start small, like a Series A company, when you have to figure out, okay, if your marketing budget is like 50K or 100K, what's the best ROI on this, right? And definitely organic is a long-term ROI. So if you even look at the inbound marketing strategy, right, it's about creating evergreen content, which is going to be there on how you discover everything, how you basically have a longer-term relationship rather than a short-term relationship for immediate sales numbers.
Yeah, I agree. We have two very interesting questions, but they are quite particular ones. It's can we recommend? I don't know how to apply it to actually any because the region is big. But how we can recommend to choose our keywords and how to pick up the right screenshots for organic marketing. And for your application, if you are not a big brand, if you're just a medium enterprise, or you are starting your application, actually, how do you choose it? How do you do the research?
So while I'm not,
and is it any cultural things?
Sure. While I'm not an expert at App Store optimization, but when it comes to experimentation, you have access to sometimes paid media. So, you can, let's say if you have 10 creatives, you run those 10 creatives on Facebook, on different platforms, see which of those creatives are making sense to the users, which have high CTRs, different ad copies with the keywords that you have in mind in those different ads, and see which ad copy is something which is resulting into more efficient sort of paid marketing. Take it from there and then go and put it on your Play Stores and App Stores. Sometimes that strategy has worked out well for brands which are upcoming in the region. And I would love to sort of hear from Ankit and Almitra if they have similar or different thoughts on this.
I'll pass it for Almitra. She's the marketing guru here. So
I think for ASO, right? I agree with whatever Aditya mentioned. You have to start off with your value proposition, basically, right? And try to figure out how you can differentiate, because as he rightly said, there is so much of noise out there in the App Store. So either you pay money and kind of swim through the noise, or you basically have to do it organically, which it could be, and it definitely is a challenge. So you have to kind of work around it and figure out the right keywords that resonate. So differentiation and competitive research is extremely important. You have to figure out what kind of category you fit in. What is the problem that you're trying to solve that your competitors are not doing for you? One of the tactics I have seen work really well is videos. Nowadays, it's a lot of effort, but videos definitely do a lot of branding for yourself. People are consuming videos quite a bit. If you give them a blog post or if you give them a video, they are more likely to click on a video. So you can do a good amount of A/B testing around it and try to figure out which tactics work the best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree completely. But talking about users, is it different? How it works with users and feedback in Asia Pacific, and when we're comparing this to the Western world, where users actually prefer to leave the public feedback, or they prefer, I don't know, sometimes they leave reviews just as stars without any feedbacks, or they just stop using your application. Is what's the difference of their behavior?
So I can go first here. One thing, in my experiences in the US, right, they used to actually go through customer success and proper channels or talk to the salespeople. We also had a community at Twilio. We had a community which was very active, and a lot of people used to provide feedback there. Either some feature was not working, or they wanted something to get into the roadmap for the next iteration. So these things really work for us. So when I moved back here, I don't know. I just see that people out here I see them use Twitter quite a bit. And I wouldn't say that people don't use Twitter in the US, but I see that people are not afraid anymore to use public channels. So you need to have a good corporate brand around it, and someone who's looking at that handle constantly. And at the same time, make sure you have people who are answering those questions. So you cannot just have questions on Twitter with no answers around it. Another channel that I have seen work well is having like user generated content, right? Or even if you have corporate blog section, people do write a lot of comments on the blog, and that's how also you can start engaging when you release a new feature or when you have a new offering for the end user. Then how can you basically figure out if it is something that has worked for them? So blogs is something you can discuss, or any kind of other tool that helps people to engage on your blog platform to WordPress or anything would be ideal. And as I mentioned, right, a community of users, that's one of your best bet, because that is where the prospects and the customers are able to collaborate. And at the same time, you can have your product managers and customer support people part of that community who can point them in the right direction, instead of having too much noise and confusing your end audience.
Just whatever you do, please don't put an automated bot response on Twitter. So
Yes.
and as Almitra was saying, completely agree. I think the audience, especially in a lot of regions, what I've seen in India and some other regions as well, is that they can be a little unforgiving at times with their comments and ratings. But I think it's a good problem to have, right? The best thing with negative feedback or criticism is that 99% of the time it's actionable. So, one thing that I would strongly urge for, developers who are trying to get into the market is try and open as many channels for your users to reach out to you. There are tools that you can utilize, Fresh Chat or Help Shift or something, which you can integrate within your app, wherein users can speak to your support teams or browse, how-to articles or FAQs from within the app. It's really important to give them that option, so they choose that option first, instead of one thing goes wrong and you go to Twitter and try to blow up the brand. So I think a lot of times what happens is people get frustrated when they do not see which doors to knock on, and that's when they go on Facebook and Twitter. And if that is happening with your app, take that as a feedback that you need to make more options available for your users to reach out to you.
I think I have something to say.
Yeah. I think everyone was talking about negative feedback, so that's sort of the biggest elephant in the room. So let's address that first. It is a human tendency, right? When things go wrong, we complain, and when things go right, we don't do anything about it because we expect them to be that way. So which is why when things go wrong, people go and put out things on social openly, put out bad reviews on your App Store pages. And like Ankit said, I think you need people to sort of address that negative feedback, take it on quickly, pass it on to product. But a little bit about positive feedback. So, and I've had this experience with many apps, right? You build, so let's say, I'm on an e-commerce app and I search for a product, searching from that product and to checking out, finally paying for that product. Let's say all of this happened within 1 minute. So if this did not take time, I'm sure to have had a good experience with that app, right? And then if you give me a pop-up, please rate us on Play Store, give me a positive feedback and things like that. So product building for things which can get you positive feedback on your stores, on your social channels and things like that is more like, something that brands should be doing. And yes, negative feedback will come in and we'll take it in and we'll address it. So that's how I think it works. To some brands in APAC at least, I don't know how does it work in the Western world, but people really care about incentives, cashbacks, rewards, and points. So you give them those rewards, you give them cashbacks, leave a positive feedback, and take away, $1 cashback into whatever wallet. Give a positive feedback and take this gift from us. So that's, I think, what has worked in this market. And things like these are like product hacks which your product can be building to improve on ratings and reviews.
Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting about the difference in Western users and Asian users. Who could you say who is like, I don't know, which users are more easy to work with? With their users' feedback, who are more, I don't like to say it, but who are more negative, or which users are more positive? Like, can you say it by the region? Which are, like, for example, these users are more easy to work with, like US, for example, or I don't know, or in India they're mostly polite and happy and just saying, oh, sorry, we just don't like some small things and leave 10 stars, not 1 star. Is there any tips?
I mean, I can speak definitely for the users in India, and as I said, I think if there's rating on any sort of platform, whether it's inbuilt within your product, when you're asking the user to rate you or you ask them to go to the app store to rate you, I think the maximum you would see is either 5 or 1, right? So it's more of a binary choice of rating that I've seen in this region. I'm not too sure of how it's in other regions like Indonesia or in China, but whether it's easy to work with, I mean, it's obviously easier to work with people who are happy with you, but that is not the challenge. You need to make sure that you go out there and listen to each and every guy who has not rated you 5-star, whatever way is scalable and possible, and make sure that, as Aditya said, that you need to put a loop to funnel that feedback back to your product team, back to your engineering team, back to your everyone in the org. Like it needs to start with the CEO, who needs to be on the lookout for this feedback, especially which is criticism. I think that's the only thing that will help you improve your product and win back customers who have not been happy with you. And if you do things for them, they go on to become your strongest champions. So it's a big opportunity to build more influencers and champions for you when you see someone rate you 1 star.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me ask just one question to start closing our session. And is just one advice you would give to any app owners or brands who are planning to enter the Asia Pacific region? Just one advice. The best one.
I would just say that your users are not only like on the app, on your app or inside the app store. Your users are there across the channels. So don't silo your approach of acquiring those users only through channels which are not on app. Like your users are on web still, and that's a good channel for you to create a buzz where users can discover you. It's even if you do as much ESO, you do as much paid advertising as possible. I mean, that's good, you should do that, but don't neglect other channels.
Yeah, Didier, what do you think? What's your best advice?
Tough question. When you work with so many marketers, I think when you work with so many marketers with different marketers, you get to see things which have worked here and there. But I think the best advice would be to understand the differences from the Western markets. Within Asia, understanding the differences, sometimes what tends to work in India might actually not work elsewhere. And based on that, customize your strategy, explore partnerships, customizing your marketing strategy, localizing it in a certain way so that it is meant for the market. And you are sort of, not losing that human touch when you're marketing to your users, because increasingly people are hiring data scientists and people are hiring engineers to run their digital marketing. And we've lost that human element sometimes of creatives and ad copies in this marketing in the world that we are in. So don't lose that human touch. And that's probably the one advice that I would give to marketers.
That's actually very good advice, because sometimes you can see that applications, they're more for business or more very technical, and you're trying to reach them and there's, I don't know, no response, for example, on your small complaints or something. That's very important. And Mitra, what do you think? Not what do you think, but what's your the best advice for the companies who wants to start to reach the Asia Pacific region?
Sure. So for me, like we have customers with more than 100 million plus app downloads, right? Who are acquiring users at a crazy rate, but their main issue is around monetizing their users. So the apps that prioritize retention and use retention as their growth strategy rather than just acquisition are the ones likely to win in the long term. So you cannot play the short game. You really have to play the long game. The cost to acquire users is almost 5x than to retain them. Marketers need to plan their retention strategy a lot more in advance. Since the CAC is low in emerging markets, you might be a victim and put all your eggs in the basket for acquisition. However, it is really crucial that your growth strategy needs to involve both sides of the coin, which is retention and acquisition. So stay away from the leaky bucket problem, basically.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys, for all your tips and really useful advices and for the discussion. I'm afraid we're a little bit running out of the time. I mean, I would love to talk like another couple of hours because the region is actually amazing. It's a booming region and it's so different. Like each country is very different, and the culture and how you can do your optimization in each country. And I hope we give some helpful advices for our attendees. And please, we didn't have a time to go through all the questions in our chat, but we will reply to them later, to each of these questions. So please, if you have another questions, guys, reach us, and we're happy to give you more information and some more details, and maybe to help you with your ASO strategies and I don't know, or keywords optimization, or any way we can be helpful. So Mitra, Aditya, and Ankit, thanks a lot for joining us for the discussion, and thanks a lot for really all your insights and information, because it's very helpful. And I hope to see you next time on our next sessions. And
of course. Yeah.
Should say bye.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thanks Aditya. Thanks Almitra. Thanks Katya.
Thanks, Katya.
Thank you. Bye.